cotton campaign has been an important space for civil society and business and trade unions, and to be able to talk together and figure out how to approach a country that, you know, for years over the course of the past 10 years was really difficult to communicate with. As far as the progress goes, I do think we're all very heartened by the commitments that have been made. I met with the Uzbek ambassador to the U.S. He was very gracious. He asked a lot of the right questions. I read Deputy Prime Minister Narbayeva's interview with you, and I mean, I actually took her comments to be more than we're having an impact. I think there's an openness there to engaging civil society. Right now, I think all of us are in a bit of a trust building phase, if we can put it that way. And I think it's important anytime you're entering a process of reform and change, that you don't cut short the trust building phase. That has to happen now. We're heartened that a lot of the activists, I mean, we run urgent actions, and so we've been very busy over the years when some of the human rights activists in Uzbekistan have been charged with certain criminal offenses or put in a psychiatric ward and things like that. And so we've been heartened that some of those human rights activists have actually had the opportunity to meet with the Uzbek government. That's positive. Most of them are still facing charges or have been declared mentally incompetent, and therefore they have limits on their citizenship because of that. I think, you know, the trust building phase has a lot to do with when those charges are dropped. I think there are still some other individuals who are in jail, for example, for having tried to organize an independent trade union. You know, these are some of the really immediate near-term signals that we're looking to see happen as we follow this path of trust building. For us, for the cotton campaign, the next phase is, you know, we want to go to Uzbekistan, so we're organizing a delegation that will go in the spring, and, you know, we very much are working on developing much more specific recommendations. That engagement, I think, is the important next step as far as how can we talk through what are the milestones, what are the changes we hope to see happen. For us, ending forced labor in the cotton sector, you know, you're halfway there when you've admitted that it's a problem, but the road ahead is still a bit arduous because it requires not just it does require paying better wages, but it also requires legal reforms, some financial or economic policy reforms. So we're looking to see not just an end to the quotas, but also some financial and economic freedoms for farmers in terms of what are their choices, what's their access to credit, how do they get inputs into their farming, you know, how are pricing structures working? I mean, really, to see that reform, it's going to take a little while, and we understand that they're piloting sort of some quota-free farming, some farms that aren't, they're piloting an end to quotas, and I have not gotten a briefing. I look forward to hearing this directly from them as to how you begin to dismantle this elaborate system that's existed for quite a while, as she points out in her interview. So right now we have some public commitments that have been made, and we've had some really good signals that we're welcoming from the Uzbek government. The next step is to figure out how deep do those commitments run, and are they going to be addressing the systemic issues, basically the root causes to forced labor. And the root causes to forced labor have to do with the things that I signaled about, some of those economic freedoms for farmers, and also the, you know, the wages for the workers, the people who are picking the cotton. But, you know, I think the Deputy Prime Minister refers to the process of moving towards a free market in agriculture, and that's a little bit of a journey. So I think we're really 2 to 3 years out from getting to that phase where we feel like, okay, this has really changed systemically. What we're building at the moment is a set of recommendations that would create a bit of a roadmap if you will, sort of metrics for measuring progress. I talked about this when I met with the Uzbek ambassador to the U.S. about working together on developing some of those milestones of what would help everybody understand that this is really changing.
What did he say?
He was very open to it, and so that's why we're planning a delegation and hoping to develop that.
Is this going to happen sometime this year?
Yeah, I think in the spring.
What do you say to those skeptics who say, especially inside the country, who say, you know, now that we have started to tackle this issue, now that we have recognized this issue, and our government seems to be working on it, and it is an integral part of our reform agenda, why do we need to listen to these outside groups?
I think we're not, it's never been about the outside groups. The folks on the ground that have been documenting the problems, I mean, the sort of, those human rights activists that have been public are really just a small portion of the people who have actually been documenting the problem. And a lot of the people who work in the fields to document the violations, they have not yet gone public. They're not quite there to feeling that confidence to go public. So a lot of what we do is try and hear those voices from the ground and integrate those into policy recommendations. So when we hear from them that things should change, and I do think one of the things I found interesting in Deputy Prime Minister's comments in your interview was she's saying, as I understand it, she's saying that, you know, the change is coming from Uzbekistan.
Right.
And I think that has to be the case. The change does have to come from Uzbekistan. I would say from the Uzbek people, and enabling them to have that voice. It starts with dropping charges and freeing people who are in jail for charges that we would argue they shouldn't be in jail for, but it then also goes to other levels of reform in terms of the freedom of the press, in terms of the ability of civil society organizations to have a voice and operate freely. I think these are some of the things that we're looking at. How do we, you know, put them down in writing so we can discuss them concretely? But really getting to that other level where the citizenry in Uzbekistan is able to have a voice in this process. That's when I think we'll be seeing that success. And it's not far off. And, you know, taking the decrees and the commitments that have happened so far to that next level is really that next, it's the litmus test for, you know, is this public commitment being implemented?
The Uzbek government wants to have partners like the ILO, and we hear this all the time. We trust the ILO, they're the most credible group, and if others want to work the way ILO has been working with us, we're willing to work with them, right? I mean, that's what we hear a lot in Uzbekistan. What do you think of that approach?
For most of the organizations around the table at the Cotton Campaign, particularly for my organization, the International Labor Rights Forum, we very much value the ILO. We spent 6 or 7 years campaigning to get Uzbekistan to welcome the ILO in. That's why we were able to build consensus among employer and NGO and union organizations, because Uzbekistan didn't want the ILO mission to come in originally. And so having them welcome that in, that was the point of our campaign. So we're really happy they're there. We're really happy that the Decent Work Country program is going forward. The ILO has been very open with us about, you know, their reporting, and we're talking to them about how that can be improved, how they can integrate some of the things we're getting from some of the grassroots monitors. It's very difficult as a large international organization to really get that kind of bottom-up input, and we're in conversations with them about how to do it. So I think that we're working through all the time how to improve on all sides, and we're making a lot of progress. The ILO, they are reporting 336,000 cases of forced labor. So even as you come in as an international body coming in from the outside, you know, that's significant that they've been able to document that. And it's not easy in any context to document forced labor. And we're now looking at how do you combine this sort of formal structured survey process with the kind of bottom-up grassroots process that some of the monitors who have been a little less public about their profile have been doing. This is not really about us not being empathetic or understanding. I mean, we understand change takes time, but we also haven't found it possible to campaign for human rights in a way that says, oh, go ahead, take your time in changing. It always has to be a little bit of extra push to make it happen. And believe me, we have invested what we can and hope to invest more in changes in our own country as well as countries abroad.
So when
we support and work with a lot of groups that are trying to change the child labor laws in the U.S.
So when the Uzbek officials tell you that, well, it's very hard for us to change these farmers, to change these local officials who are so used to rely on cheap free labor, we need time to train them, we need time to educate them, we need time to make the public aware, you are willing to understand. Because that's the
describe what you mean by understand. That there's an awareness raising process that has to happen. Yes. That political and economic pressure on people to behave a certain way should end slowly. No, that needs to end. The problem is that there are a lot of small local level pockets of corruption that have grown up around this system that need to be weeded out. And so you can put the decree, and you need to stop pushing the pressure down on the hakims and on the local officials. But then there's some beneficiaries in between, the sort of hiring somebody. So when a teacher says, here, I just want to hire someone to work for me, there's some process where there's some skimming off the top. This will take time to address all of this, and there's awareness raising. That we understand there needs to be awareness raising, and change takes time. Absolutely. That's why we're saying we think it'll take 2 to 3 years to really have a real reform in place, fully implemented.